Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Far Above Rubies today. I'm so very glad that each of you are here. Today, as we're continuing our series on lessons from the wilderness, we're talking about the idea that my promise will come when my heart is ready. My promise will come when my heart is ready. We're going to read Hebrews chapter 3, verses 15 through 19 together, and it says this: Remember what it says, today when you hear his voice, don't harden your hearts as Israel did when they rebelled. And who was it who rebelled against God, even though they had heard his voice? Wasn't it the people Moses led out of Egypt? And who made God angry for 40 years? Wasn't it the people who sinned, whose corpses lay in the wilderness? And to whom was God speaking when he took an oath that they would never enter his rest? Wasn't it the people who disobeyed him? So we see that because of their unbelief, they were not able to enter into his rest. Before Israel as a whole could enter the promised land, Israel as a whole had to get their heart right with God. It wasn't about a few individuals. It was about a shift in mindset for the nation of Israel over and over. Just like that scripture said, over and over they complained, they railed against God, they rejected his supernatural miracles like we talked about yesterday. We're tired of this manna. We hate this supernatural provision, they said. And before they could see the promised land as a whole, there had to be a shift. And so some of a generation died off, an entire generation died off before they could actually reach the promised land that God was to give them. A generation had to rise up that had a heart towards God. Then and only then could they receive their promise. Now, this isn't applicable to all promises. That loved one that you've been praying for, that God has promised you will one day come back home to him, your heart being ready for that promise has nothing to do with their decision to make their way back to God, okay? This is not applicable to every promise God has given you in life, but there are some promises. We're talking about the promises that God has given for your life and the things that are to come in your life for you, for your path, for your faith, for your relationship with him. Okay, our hearts have to be ready. We have to have a right direction in our lives. We have to have a right attitude. We need to be ready, willing, and able to walk in our promise. If we couldn't do that, why would God give us that promise before we're ready for it, before we can handle it, before we're mature enough, okay? If I walked in my promise 9 years ago when we moved here to start a church, if I walked in the promises God had given me right then, my heart would not have been ready. I would not have had the gratitude for my promises that I now have when I walk in them. I wouldn't be the same person today if God had given me everything he promised me right then, instead allowing me to go through a process, instead allowing me to mature in my faith, instead allowing me to have my faith grow and build and watch small things come to pass, one that led to another, that led to another. It allowed me to see the goodness of God. It allowed me to see the faithfulness of God. It allowed me to trust him in a much sweeter way because there was a span of time in between the promises being given and the promises being fulfilled. And now I stand and I walk in my promises with a gratitude that I cannot hardly express because I waited so long to see those promises, and God changed so much in me in order for me to receive those promises and be ready for them. And so I leave you with a simple thought today. That is, my promise will come when my heart is ready to receive it, when my faith is ready to walk in it, when I can be the person inside my promise that God desires me to be, then my promise will come. This, again, remember, does not apply to everything outside of your life. This applies to what God has for your personal walk with him. When your heart is ready, you will walk in your promises because God is faithful and he has never broken a promise yet. If no one's told you lately, you are loved and you are cherished and you are valuable. You have beautiful and tremendous worth, my sweet friend, and that worth is far above rubies. Thank you so much for being here today. I'll see you all again tomorrow. God bless you.